Welcome to Leap Into Your Story podcast, where you discover your inner story, break down the process, and meet others who've done it so you can leap into your own story. We interview amazing guests who provide powerful insights that inspire you to get your story told. Be sure to visit our website at leapintoyourstory.com, and while you're there, subscribe and like us via your favorite social media network. Now sit back, get ready to take some notes, and let's get started. This episode of Leap Into Your Story podcast is brought to you by Leap Into Your Story course. Visit leapintoyourstory.com, where you have a guide to get your story told. So I'm Victoria Anderson, and welcome to Leap Into Your Story podcast, where you discover your inner story, work through the processes, and meet others who've done it. We interview great guests that provide powerful insights and help to inspire you to get your story told. So be sure to visit my website at leapintoyourstory.com, and while you're there, subscribe and like via your favorite social media network. So in this episode, I'm going to discuss gathering your courage for your story matters. And so now, let's begin. So sit back, get a notepad and 2 pens ready, and let's get started. So my guest today is the amazing Amaliah Grace. She's a dancer, teacher, and choreographer, and sound channeler. But today, we're going to talk about Amaliah, the author. So in 2010, she began writing her story on her transformation and launched it in 2019 on her 70th birthday. So she currently lives in Brisbane, Queensland, in Australia, and has several unfinished manuscripts that are waiting for us to explore. So, Miss Amaliah, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about your journey, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Yeah, the journey was huge. So when you begin and start to be a writer, and I'm a memoir writer, so it's quite different to writing. If you've got an idea to write a story, which is a novel, but we have to writing a memoir is like writing a novel, so that it needs to have as much impact and story and push the audience, your readers, along the way. So my journey, I actually started writing in 2010, and the section that I'm writing about is when I transitioned from being a choreographer and a dancer, etc., and was looking after my aged father, and delving deeply into healing myself, past lives, and inner child work. And wanting to become able to carry more light, to be able to feel. I have become a clairsentient. I'm still not a clairvoyant, except under dreaming state. The journey itself was huge. So one time I went to see another author publish her book and promote it on a footpath up in the Sunshine Coast where I was living. And when she said she took 7 years to write it, to get it into that publication completion, it was like, oh my God, is it really going to take that long? Well, guess what? It did. I wrote solidly for 2 years every day. I'm a cafe writer, and I used to write in the cafes which overlooked the ocean. So I had a lot of visual stimulus. I had fresh air, and partly why the other manuscripts are on hold is because COVID totally changed that last year, and the cafes that I was working in closed down, and I decided to relocate here. So you're on a journey anyway, but when you start to be a writer and write your own personal story, you're definitely on a journey.
Yes, indeed. Well, yes, and I remember seeing those posts because you and I have uh, connected like at least a decade. I think it's been at
I would
least a
say
decade.
so.
Yeah, I think
I
it
think,
has been.
yeah, I
Yeah,
would say.
online. And I
Mm,
remember you writing or mentioning and talking about that while you were in the cafes. But I will tell you, and sorry to hear about the cafe that helped to inspire you, but statistically, the pandemic has actually helped memoir writers because
yeah,
they're locked
yeah.
down.
They've
And
got
fiction
time.
is good, yes, but there's something about, and to be honest, in the writer's world, memoirs are kind of poo-pooed a little bit, unless you're a famous person. But
Mm,
the
mm,
tide of change has really come. And people are looking for memoirs more than any other time because they're searching for answers because the pandemic has provided them some solitude to reflect, and
mhm,
they want to know, they want to read about other people who've been through certain situation that they have.
mm,
So the memoir market has just skyrocketed. um
mm.
you know
Yeah, so that's in the States. That's very interesting.
mhm.
That's happening. I'm not necessarily aware of that at the moment here, but not to say that I won't. So I ended up being, because of that, I ended up being self-publishing. I did actually get it to, so I took 2 years solid to write it all. So this is a big book. It's ended up 120,000 words.
Wow.
So it's not a little book. It's got a lot of information in it. It's got a lot of research information as I've gone along the way. I've talked about Louise Hay, I've talked about Wayne Dwyer, I've talked about, the cellular biologist and the whole process of healing and how things shift. And I've got a lot of channelings in it, many of my healings, some of the very important shifts that happen within healing processes, ceremonies, and of course, going to Peru. But then I spent, after having finished what I thought was the baseline, which what ended up being the baseline, I probably didn't realize that at the time, but it needed a lot of editing. Then I thought, well, I'll try and get it. I'll just have a glass of water to send to a couple of publishing houses. And the process of sending to publishing houses, you need to learn how to do a book proposal. Now, it's a whole other form of writing, and it's
Indeed.
completely different. I mean, just trying to find, so it took me a year just to source all the different ways of doing a book proposal. But not only that, because my story encompasses a huge variety of different ideas, writing a book proposal helped me to get a real handle on what my book was about, who was the audience, who is it for, and what am I trying to say in detail about it, so that I can advertise and promote. And of course, being the creative person that I am, being a choreographer, I've never been a marketer, so it was a huge learning just to learn how to get your log line. The one line at the top, which I did this over and over and over again, and then ended up with the person who did publish my book with me. And so my log line is for, I don't know if you can, of course, this is back to front, isn't it? Igniting the
No,
cosmic
that's
dance.
fine. We can see it.
Can you
Yes,
see it?
I
So it's
can.
got the
Yes.
flower of life on there.
Yep.
And so it's an awakening to star lineage and the codes of light. That's what that bottom says. Dances vulnerability and courage leads to spiritual evolution. just trying to get that one line, and also the back book blurb. It's such an art form, and it took many rewrites and assistance with different people.
Yes.
And I sent it to 2 different publishers, and one of them sent back a positive rebuttal, is all I can say, because what they apparently, if they're not interested, you won't actually hear back. And I got a letter saying, after much consideration, we decided that it was not appropriate for our next, series of publications. So that meant that it had gone to the table, to the main, to be tabled and to be discussed. After that, I kind of, lost the impetus and left it for a year, because another story was emerging, which it was an emotional story that I just had to get out onto paper, onto the writing, and it took over. So there's a year there. Then it was obviously all designed, because you need the space to get a different objective view of it before you go back again. It's not necessarily a year, of course, not in any way necessarily a year, but it was what it was. And in the process, I matched up with a friend, a woman who was also dancing tango, who was wanting to go to Peru, and I gave her my manuscript and said, "Here, you read the sections where I've gone to Peru, and I've experienced ayahuasca and wachuma and all the ceremonies." And after she came back, unbeknownst to me, this is spirit guiding one in a very positive way. She lived down the road in a house. We'd been talking to each other, and we didn't know we lived in the same street. Also, she had done majored in English writing, novels, and creative writing. So she then became my editor, and that took a whole year. We did 3 run-throughs, and she edited at different kind of perspectives. And the final edit that she did, she was really looking at, okay, she would say to me, this, like my spiritual stuff, I would just presume that other people would understand it. And she and she said, "Please explain." So I had to go into more detail. So that's why, instead of it being 210,000 words, it ended up being 120,000 words, because it was like, please explain, in many, many areas, so that it was much more detailed. And so the book itself is actually pretty good. I'm told by many people how surprised they are at how well written it is. And my heart goes out always to my friend Susie, who made that happen. Wow. I put some. So you have to get an objectivity about your story when you've got to a point where somebody else is helping you edit it, and not be too precious about how you say things. Of course, sometimes that has come up, but not as much as I expected it might have. Yeah, so it's just an incredible process, and it's really important to have people around you. Be in a writing group, maybe get to have other people who are in the genre that you're writing. I'm not presuming here that all of your audience is going to be doing a spiritual story. So whatever your genre is, and that's important to find out, where are you marketing and targeting your story, and the kind of age bracket. And often, of course, it will cover a big age bracket, but if you refine it to know that you're doing a specific area. Mine is not just for women. I have had men read it and just been, loved it, and found that the information that's involved in there, and all the contacts to other writers, and healers and New Age information. It's got a big bibliography at the back. So it's not just for women, but that's important to know who you're writing for. And of course, that can take a long time. That can take a long time. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I can write my books, and of course, uh, I laugh. I'm like, I'm really not an author. I'm more of an editor because it takes me about 2 years to write each book and 10 years to edit, which is,
Yeah, that sounds right.
yep.
Yeah.
And I've had a longtime editor like drive nuts. I probably aged her because she'll go ahead and edit, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna edit, and then I'll edit after her editing, and then she's got to re-edit over my edit. So, but yeah, it's been a crazy almost 20 years. Well, yes, actually, it is almost 20 years. So, but yeah. So
Wow.
since we from the started to, and to now, I've got 3 books. So the first one is Touched, and I have the other 2, Trial by Fire and Mastering the Paradox. And you know, when I wrote it mainly, for myself. I know that in your notes you had mentioned that you had so many supernatural or spiritual things that you were compelled to write, and that's kind of, and mine are so abundant that it took 3 books to tell my story, because all 3 of them are my I don't write a memoir, I write memoirs. So the series,
Yeah.
the series,
Yeah.
not the book, but the series. So
Yeah. Fantastic.
yeah.
That's great.
But yeah, and
Well,
the first book was over 500 pages, and I, when I first started and finished the final draft of it, sending it off to the publisher, said that's a whole different set of different writings. You have to do your synopsis, and you have to send a couple of chapters sometimes, and then waiting for the letter. And lucky for you, you got the gracious letter of at least we're going to contact you, but they just kind of go to the ethers. But in
at
2000,
least consideration.
yes.
That's right. Yeah.
It's kind of like the nothingness is worse than a rejection letter, because you're like, I want to know.
I would say it would be very, be very, very hard. Agree.
That was one of the things when I had the first book done, and I was doing it the conventional way, where you send out your query and get your synopsis, and you send them to a couple of publishers, and you're like, well, should I wait and see if something, because what if I have to send it to more publishers? So it was like, yes, I was kind of relieved when I got a rejection letter, because then I can go, okay, cross you off the list, try to cross you off. But in 2014, I actually signed on with a publisher, and they were interested in all 3 books.
Wonderful.
So I was so happy about that. The 2 books were written. The 3rd book was just starting. So it gave me the incentive to kind of hurry up and get that 3rd book done. And then the publisher went belly up. So,
oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So it's like the
wow.
saga. And I says, finally,
had they paid you? Had they paid you in advance?
They had to, but they did keep in contact and saying that, the deadline for when they, was supposed to be spring of 2015, and then it moved to spring of 2016, and then the communication just went off the radar, and the editor never responded, and their phone number was their website, their phone number was gone. But
Well, fairly soon after I'd got that, had that year of doing nothing on it, then Hay House were coming out to Sydney for a Hay House writers workshop. So
right.
I flew down to Sydney and did their workshop. And part of doing their physical workshop, you of course can present a manuscript. So I decided to present
Wonderful.
that manuscript again. And also they gave us the opportunity to buy the online workshop, which is at a much reduced rate. It was only 200 Australian dollars, as opposed to, I think, if you go straight on to Hay House and buy that, I think it's something like $1,000. So it was extensive. So that again then gave me a chance to present something else. But of course, I didn't win any of them. But it meant that they gave examples in both instances. They gave examples of other manuscripts that had won in the past and been published. And at the time, so I'm talking now just before, it was 2017. That of course, with what's current is the food revolution, and all the food revolution books were taken up, like Crispy Cancer and and quite a few of those. So memoir is not really, as you say, it's not big, and having it self-published is really probably the way to go, unless you are a famous person. But make sure that you still do the same kind of work, that you pay for an editor, that you really have someone help with the book cover design and all of that, so that you put it out. This looks like a professional book, it looks like a professionally published book.
Yes.
It doesn't look like a new
do-it-yourselfer. Yes. It's high grade.
Yeah, and that's right. So if you're going to put the effort in to write it, you may as well also put the effort into getting it as best as you possibly can, so you give it a chance.
Right.
And keep learn how to do things. We're never too old to learn.
Yes. Well, it keeps the synapses in the mind sharp. There's something about writing that nothing else, I think, works the brain like writing. I don't know, maybe reading is the next thing, but writing has certainly has sharpened a whole lot of skills, especially editing, because when you go through something, it may not hit you, but then you go through it again and you're like, man, I missed that word. And so it trains you to look for the details that, it works your focus and your alertness. At least in my experience, I don't know. But all I know is when I'm in editing mode, my entire rest of my life, it becomes a whole lot sharper and focused too. That just might be me, but yes, especially if editing like 200-300 pages of manuscript, I'm stuck in that editor mode, so everything's just, I don't know, heightened after that. It's kind of a little hard to explain, but it does something to your perception. Most definitely, like it's skills it or works that certain part of the brain. Again,
well, that's right. Whereas when you're writing, you're working with the intuitive brain, and then when you're editing, you're working from the rational brain.
Yes,
so we're actually working with the two balanced, different sides of the brain.
See, there is science to my madness, right?
There is. Yeah, there is indeed.
Good to know.
Yeah. But, well, one of the things that one of the questions you asked is like, what did I learn, and are there cathartic moments? Uh, definitely there are, because depending on what period you're writing as a memoir writer and your own personal story, to really get to the truth, one does need to dig deep, which means going very much within and pulling up those memories so that you're really remembering the detail of it, and you have to almost put yourself into a meditative state in
Yes.
the to feel and to be able to express the feeling and the shocks or the trauma or whatever it is. And of course, that is going to bring up the tears but the lovely thing of that is that once you've done that section, that cathartic section, which may have been, then it's gone. So once it's on paper, it's kind of done. And like, for instance, now it's, what is it? It's 2 years since the book was published, and I'm now developing my art. So that's one of my,
I was just going to ask you. I says that looks like one of your beauties behind you.
That's a mandala I'm doing. So that's why my mailing list haven't heard from me, because I've gone into a real cave and into a very different creative place and relocated. And yeah, I've got quite a lot of different art. And these are some of my. This is just a art journal. So I got. So again, you probably can't tell what that says.
It says words
and stories.
And stories, yes.
Words and stories.
We are what does that say? Creators?
Okay. So stories are wild creatures.
Oh, creatures.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a little so I'm really getting into watercolors. So that one up there is acrylic. It's not watercolor, but I'm exploring lots of watercolors, and I've got the next lot of codes, Ascension codes, developing. So from that large Ascension code program, which is people can go and meditate and work with both sound and image. I'm now decoding each one of the glyphs that came through channeled through in those codes. So it will probably be a series of cards in one process. So there's one I can show you. Let's see if I can just I've got one here in. Oh.
Oh, very nice. Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful.
So that one I actually channeled through on the day of the US, the presidential elections, and it's called Redemption. Yeah. Anyway, and then there was lots and lots. So getting back to the writing, let's get back. So that's to be continued. People are interested. Sometime, they can go onto my mailing list, and they will soon receive some information about it all.
Yeah.
So you're wanting to know.
I love the one behind you, by the way, because I know.
Yes.
Well, we'll talk about your website at the end. This way, everybody knows all the assortments that you have to offer, because you're like me. You're multi-dimensional, and of course, I do ceramics and art too. So
beautiful.
Yes. And actually,
and you're a real estate agent, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, and that Liz is now podcasting. So yes, it's just kind of, and as you notice, it's Victoria, which is VYKTORYA. That's actually my artist name. That's my artist brand. So,
right, lovely.
So that's all my artwork, and my branding is all underneath that, for at least my artwork. So. So yes, but we you know what, I will do another show certainly about art, and of course I'm working on a book on journey as an artist too. So there's about three other books I'm working on. So there's one, my second book is Trial by Fire, but my journey as a ceramic artist is going to be Journey Through the Fire. So,
Oh, right. Wow, that's fantastic.
yeah. So,
Um, so you were asking, one of the questions you were asking is how my story has helped others. So
yes, let's
um,
talk about that.
what I thought was the best way to define it was to actually give you some testimonials that have come
Okay,
from other people.
absolutely.
I always knew that when I was writing my story, and once I got to the end of it, that it was going to be. There were three main levels that people could come into it. There would be, I was really writing it for a lot of light workers like myself and their journey, and I knew that because I'm talking about many of my development goes through with some of the major galactic alignments, and the return of the Magdalene flame, and I think things like that in 2004, 2005, 2010, 999. Many of those experiences, and the mature light workers have all contributed and been doing likewise work at that time. So there are those who that and yeah, sorry. So this comes from actually Karen, who in fact many of her channelings. So she journeyed along with me in the story, and I would go down and see her and have healings, and always get her to channel information afterwards. So it was quite interesting when I sent her the book, and she spent quite a bit of time before she got to read it. But then she did write, and so what she said here is, although most of the journey occurred during a very different time period before the internet, online workshops and gatherings, it reminded me how much personal experience and the magic of an unfolding physical quest is itself the teacher. Resources miraculously manifest to help us create our own particular journey. Amaliah demonstrates the mechanics of the spiritual development evolution through the magical synchronicity of people, money, situations simply appearing in response to heartfelt intention and compulsion, surrender, determination, and fearlessness, and through grace and love itself. So I thought that was quite beautiful. But these are some of the others that I'd like to. So then there's the person who has dabbled and put their feet in spirituality, but maybe not gone in the direction of which I had. So this is a woman from New Zealand, Anita. She said, "Your book resonates so strongly with me and has set me off on a new path of cosmic exploration. Normally, I read fast because I'm a knowledge greedy guts, but your book took me ages as I reread passages, researched new concepts, groups, music, and language that I knew nothing of, but which resonated so strongly. I'm just letting the book settle to see what I want to attend, but I tingled all over when I read the last chapter on soul line clearing." So she hadn't known very much about light language. Maybe there's not a lot of light language speakers in New Zealand. I don't know. Then I've got another one, which is from Helga. She's over in, I think, Norway or Sweden. The first chapters have been very captivating and has woken up many slumbering parts of myself about how I've been traveling so far, my childhood, my inner child, my gifts and talents, the deep calling inside, and much more. I can't wait to read the rest. So she did that initially, straight after she'd only read the first three chapters. And then when she'd finished, she said, "I've started listening to more of my intuition and calling in my spiritual guide." So this is really beautiful because it's really affected and initiated somebody. "In return, I've been flooded with energy. And after reading about your ayahuasca journey, that night, after I had a big quickening. I woke up in the middle of the night with a pounding heart and felt my body expanding and exploding into everything. And then I embodied a light that I can only describe as God's light. It was a massive experience and shocked me to my core. I find reading your book comforting and makes my experience not too crazy to deal with. Thank you for being an anchor for me. Now, this is one of the main reasons that I knew that I had to write my story, and that I had the courage to actually be visible, even though it took, sometimes I didn't feel, went into a lot of fear about that, because I knew that there's a lot of spiritual people who don't speak about, because it's, you don't, in normal communities, you don't share that.
Right.
But luckily I found, because I was going to the spiritualist churches, so I found a lot of mediums and clairvoyants, and just the right people always kept coming to be beside me. So that wasn't as much a problem for me, though though I do have to realize that one time I was still teaching the Queensland Ballet classical class, and I was in a lot of pain one time, and I stupidly told one of the dancers, I said, I think one of my angel wings is broken. He kind of thought I was absolutely crazy. So so I did learn not to speak about certain things with a certain group, the dancers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Sigrid actually, her full testimonial is up on Amazon on the Kindle site. She's got. I absolutely love this book. Just couldn't put it down. I read it 2 times within 1 month. And most of all, I love that it is a real story, a personal journal of a woman awakening, with lots of beautiful detailed descriptions of Amaliahs, the writer's spiritual experiences and development over a period of many years. I'm so happy having read this book, as I have been slowly waking up to channeling, speaking, singing, and singing the language healing abilities. At times, I felt very lonely in this path, and that's another key reason why I knew I had to share. For me, it is very reassuring and comforting and inspiring reading another woman's real experiences. And it has given me some necessary courage to take steps forward in my own development and healing. Connecting with Amaliah, her story and her gifts, and reading this book came for me at a time that I needed it. So it shows the different types of people, and what it can assist others in the process of the reading.
Yes.
Very, very, very varied. Yeah.
That
So
was,
I wanted to share all of that.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it sounds like you actually had the opposite of, in my books, I thought everybody was going to be wowed by like these supernatural elements. They were all interested in the drama.
And what you
not-
felt, how you experienced it.
Well,
Yes.
what was funny is how you talk about, some people can't relate to the spiritual thing. So I didn't think about that, and what they could relate to was, conflicts with your mother, at trying to be a free spirit when you have a controlling mother, or boyfriend cheating on you in college. I mean, these are things that people can masses can relate, but they can't always relate on, like, say, in the first book I had an encounter with a group of beings called the council. Not everybody's going to, understand that whole thing. I barely understood it because it was a very strange, brief timeline that still, is hard to put into words. But then you worry about, what are people going to say? When I launched my book, I didn't realize that family members were going to buy it. I had clients, real estate clients, and there's kind of some sex scenes in there, and all the drama. They all loved it. They all loved
Mhm.
it. But yeah, you do worry about sharing things. I mean, and mastering the paradox. I mean, I talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
I have a turtle reptilian alien coming to me from
Mhm.
Marduk,
Mm.
trying to ask me about Jesus. I'm like, all right, who's gonna hire a real estate agent who's talking to reptilian aliens
Mm.
about Jesus, right? So you put it all out there. It's part of your
Mm.
story. And
That's
you know
right.
what?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's what I wanted to write about, and if you don't
yeah.
like it, don't read it. Don't.
Well, that would be that would be the time when my editor friend Susie would say, question mark, huh? Please explain better. Please explain more.
Oh
So, like the
my
council,
goodness.
explain what the council is. So,
Yes. Oh, that's
but
so funny. Yeah. I
yeah,
can
one
totally
of the
relate with my editor, Marilyn. Yes.
yeah, exactly. And so one of the very important aspects that I learned, I found a writing mentor very early on. She wanted me to just do the first 3 chapters and present it to her, and then she was able to zone in on where my weaknesses were and how to get it better. And one of the most important things that she gave me, and I've always kept that with me, was that when you're writing about your out there spiritual experiences, when you come back, you have to anchor it in the reality. So it's like you've just had this, amazing blissful feeling, and you're in the 5th dimension, or you're talking to the council. That when you come back, oh, I'm just sitting here and I'm watching. Now I feel myself, and as I come back, the cat next door is perched on top of the fence, just ready to jump at it, bird. So, or else I've just been up on the 10th floor, starting to channel in the cosmic dancer piece in Florida, and I go downstairs into the elevator, walk out onto the ground, onto the sand, onto a sandy beach immediately, and take myself into the water and feel, express and describe the feeling of so that you're really always bringing that back into a grounding, into an anchoring place. So the reader can find you. They can feel where you are. They can feel your experience of having been out there, but also you're a human constantly. You're still a human telling a human
Right.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love that advice. That's awesome.
Mm. Oh,
That's
yeah.
a big tip.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the other thing that was interesting was that I'll get to some of the advice in
Okay.
in a bit. I've got a whole list of information of starting, of how to start, or how best to go about it.
Yeah.
If you're writing memoir, of course, not if you're writing a novel that you've got a storyline. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to go into some of
Oh,
that, and
yes.
Victor,
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm
yep.
here for, is to get information and get people past their fears, their doubts. The more
Absolutely.
information, the better. And
Hmm.
somebody who has a lot of experience, absolutely. I would love to have that.
Wonderful. Well, before I get kind of lost in where I'm going, which I can do very easily, the tapping solution, absolutely essential for any writer or author.
Mm,
Whenever you get to find a block, um, uh, just to tap the fears, tap the anxiety away. It's just a wonderful sort of backup. Um, all right, so the advice I've got is to start writing bits of your story from wherever. So, for instance, because my time in Peru, and I did take some journal notes, but not incredibly intensive, because it was a 3-week shamanic journey,
wow.
and we were doing massive amount of work every day. So right where you've got the greatest, the best memory of it and the most intense feelings and experience of that. So it doesn't matter where you don't have to feel like you're writing from a beginning, because that way you can actually put too much of a block on yourself. And imagine it's like a jigsaw puzzle. So as you write, and they don't even have to be in running order, they can just be a little section. You go, oh, today I'll write about that, I feel that. And as you write a bit more, your dreams will start to work with you. So you'll get that wake up with the impetus, oh, I feel like I'll write about that today. And so over a period of time, when you've got a lot of writing done, maybe after a year or so, depending on how many hours you allow for yourself to write, then it's like the jigsaw. Then you can start to see how you might put it together. Try and write for at least an hour each day. Though in saying that, I used to give myself the weekend off. I didn't want to write on the weekend. Took a bit of time. And when you first write it as a stream of consciousness. And the most important thing is do not edit. Don't even look at it. Maybe you can correct the spelling, that's about it, but leave it like that. And then for the next day and the next day, just continue writing a stream of consciousness. Because it's really important that you get distance from the initial writing so you can have more objectivity when you come back to actually edit. Because often we'll just want to try and get it perfect. And there's really no perfection in the writing process, because you're growing with the process of your writing. And what you've written at the very beginning in the first few months, 2 years down the track, when you come back and look at it, you'll want to you will have grown. So you'll definitely want to make changes. So don't edit all the time. Just leave it. Then find somebody that you can read it, but also for yourself, when you do come back to edit, read it out aloud. And to hear whether it runs well, whether you've got commas in the right place, and then make some corrections. And then try and find a buddy, somebody who's not going to be critical, there's no criticism, who's prepared to just sit and listen, because there's a certain nervousness that I went through when I read to another person, because you're already becoming visible, and that's got its whole aspect. So I was really lucky that where I was in a shared house, and the woman that would sit and listen, she'd actually started writing her memoir at the same time. And after like 7 years, she actually did a process of learning, and she's my publisher. So she helped me with the self-publishing process. So she did this massive learning of writing, but then how to be a publisher, how to put books up on Kindle, which was not that easy, to change the manuscript. Yes. Okay, I've gotten a bit off here. Yeah, so find a buddy, someone who, the most important thing you do not need early on is somebody to criticize it deeply, because that happened to me when I first started writing, which was like 10 years before. And I'd done a creative writing course. It was a 6-week, morning creative writing course. And the author asked me to come and join her in a little group. There was one other guy there who was obviously had done the university creative writing, and the criticism I got from him, I totally stopped writing and didn't go back to it and left it. So this is kind of really important. And if you read it to some of your family and you don't feel like you're getting good support, then just don't engage with them. You just know they're not the people that you're going to let know that you're writing this. So it's very important that you find other writers or other friends or other people who are prepared to be a non-critical writer until you've finished, and an ear. I can't tell you how important that was. So it was such a gift that I had Aisha just sit and listen, because at the time I was, of course, wanting to have some, oh, that's good, or, my ego was needing that. But it was such a gift to just be able to read it out, go listen and go, okay, this doesn't sound quite right. That doesn't sound, I haven't explained. So if you can. And then, of course, if this is your first book, find a mentor. Find a writing mentor who's a professional writing mentor who has experience and spends their time guiding people in writing, and present just a couple of chapters for them to look at and get the feedback really early on as to what your writing style is and where you need to improve yourself. That's also very valuable. Yeah. So then once you've written quite a lot, that's where you can start to go, all right, so how do I put it together? Do I want to have it all in order? Which you can, but writing a memoir is not writing a biography or an autobiography. It doesn't need to do that. You can start from one point and then sit and have reflections and flashbacks, or you can have dreams that relate to, or you can, there are many ways that you can put it all as this jigsaw all together, which makes it really more interesting than a sequential running of the story. Right. Though in saying that, I have got sections that are that. Also work out whether you're going to write in the first person, the I, and whether it's in a past tense or a present tense. So just about the whole of my book is written in past, first person past tense. However, my writing mentor invited me to go to a workshop that she was doing. So she lives on the Sunshine Coast. Her name's Rose Allen, and she does workshops which are called Writing from the Heart, Your Heart, and the other one is Your Story Matters. And so I did Rose's Writing from the Heart, and I'd already got my beginning. I thought that where I started was quite powerful, etc. But in the Writing from the Heart, she guided us to delve deeper and deeper and deeper into one of the most periods of the most traumatic time. And so out of that, in fact, came the very beginning of my book, the first chapter. So it was quite interesting. And this chapter is written in present tense, and I'll just read a few moments. Okay. And I've called it Dark Night of the Soul. So January 1993, tight neck, stomach flutters, nerves strung taut. I was agitated, unsettled. The moon-faced therapist with round, steely blue eyes looked straight through me. I shared my problems with her, and she walked to another room and on her return, placed a tiny brown bottle onto her table. Light from the window illuminated the bottle and threw a shadow upon a shiny brown wood. Take this vibrational essence, she said, 6 drops under the tongue. It will help you to meditate. My tension and anxiety still great, I desperately wanted to believe it was possible to find clarity from this one tiny bottle. So that's the only chapter that I've written in present, and it needed to have that immediacy, and then the rest of it is in past. Interesting. Yeah. I thought that was pretty interesting too. When I went to see my writing mentor and talk to her about that, she said certain sections can be done like that. If it's a really tight, taut experience, then to write it in the present. And of course, sometimes your dreams that can be written in present. And that's another thing then with dreaming, you put it in italics. in a different form of print. And sometimes it's really valuable to leave the book altogether for a couple of months and get on with something different. And especially because I'm talking about personal writing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that too, because
Yeah.
you have to kind of let things settle.
Yes, you have.
I call it settling and simmering. So being that,
Simmering.
it takes me,
Definitely.
so many, the length of editing, and that's really kind of where the time, of course, I've shrunk that now, but, as you get more experience and you write more, you hit your learning curve better.
Yeah,
But
you do.
I'll edit a book. I'll leave it anywhere, usually about 2 to 3 months. If I get too busy, maybe 6 months, and I go back through it again and see if everything is making sense, and not just about proofreading. If you have the typos, I mean, usually spell checks, but the flow is very important. And that was some of the feedback that I got, that my first book was over 300 pages, and the person who gave me the feedback, she goes, "Oh no, it couldn't have been." And I'm like, "I guarantee you, if you look at the book, it's gonna say 335 pages. I mean, you might have a couple of table of contents and an acknowledgement here, but that book was over 300." She goes, "It read so quickly because of the flow, the pace." She couldn't
That's
believe
right.
it was 300 pages. So
yeah, exactly. And mine is 500.
See?
500 and it's about 500 or 425.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, definitely flow and keep going. And then if you're a beginner writer, go to workshops, go to writing workshops, go to learn different things, learning about, I mean, the Hay House Writers online course. So if you can get, I don't know if in your country you're able to get back into going into theatres and conferences yet with
not quite. But Vegas, I think, is the only big town that's opened up, So,
all right. Wow.
But that's why one of the reasons why I figured do podcasts, because not only workshops, but listen to podcasts for great information too, and hopefully down the line, I'm hoping to do maybe a writers conference where you group everybody together online and participate and share tips and tricks. Maybe some graphic artists, some editors, and things like that, to just so everybody can be better at what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So the Hay House one was very valuable, the online one, because it was like going to 20 workshops, because it's got all the big names that they've got, the speaking at different times about different things. And it was very valuable, very informative. It was also very valuable to get practice at doing the book proposals, because I ended up doing 2 more book proposals. So really, writing is a massive journey, and when you start, you kind of think, "Oh, I'm going to do this and get it all done," but you can't do it in a day, you can't do it in a year. Those people who write and do it in 1 year are usually very experienced writers, and they've got a flow, they've got a system. These are most authors, and that might only be a 70,000 word book. So whatever is right for you, and don't worry that it's going to take you 7 to 10 years to do it.
There's some of us who needed that time, but just saying.
Yeah.
But now,
a lot of us.
Now it's 2 to 3 turnaround. Woohoo!
It gets easier. That's right. Of course it does, Victoria. Yeah. And make sure you find a good editor if you're going to be self-publishing. And there's such a lot of wonderful people that can help. They call it assisted self-publishing. whereby they're not actually a publishing house, but they'll do a lot of assistance with you. But be really look in depth on that, because a lot of people get caught out. And my sense is, don't pay for one of those before you're actually fairly ready. I know quite a few people have gotten caught out with Balboa, because they sign up for it, and of course they've only just started writing, and they're not allowing their process to take more than 2 or 3 years. And and you don't want to feel pressured by other people, or I mean, unless you've got a proper publishing house, of course, in which case then you probably need to be pressured. But if you've got that choice, take the time and find a good editor, and also start to get a real understanding from the marketing aspect of who your audience is and where you're wanting to, what your target genre is. And when it's finished, when you finish, then you need to get about 5 first readers. And then, of course, you start again from editing and getting feedback. So you can have a variety of readers, people who just like to read and it flows through, others who have got more knowledge to say, oh, that question mark there, or I didn't understand that, or and just keep going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and have the courage, because you will hit your fears at different times. Once I got it into print for the first time we looked at the book, and that was a couple of months before doing the launch, you know, that it is a scary thing, and especially with some of the spiritual aspects that I'm talking about. To be visible, to actually be visible, and to understand how are you going to respond to that visibility. On the whole, I've been lucky. I haven't had any negative hit back to me. I think people are less likely, maybe in our country, they'll read it, or they'll get to a point. For instance, I had one person who was going to be a first reader, and I offered it to her, and she's Christian, so she doesn't believe in past lives. So as soon as she saw that I was writing about past life experiences, she said, "Oh, I can't read this." So, you know, there are different reasons for different people not being able to read it, and that's fine. That's okay. That's their journey, not mine.
Right.
And you will attract the people to understand very much from a personal perspective, and to get that inner truth within you, that your story is absolutely going to attract the people who need it for them to read for their own development. And you're not just writing the story for you, even though you are in one respect. You can write the story just for you and then not show it to anybody else if you're really wanting to have that cathartic experience and let go of stuff that you no longer really need to hold on to. But, you know, dig deep and have the courage to speak your truth.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I hope that's been helpful to you.
Yes. This has been amazing information and time with you. So, Amaliah, why don't we take a moment and tell listeners where they can find more information about you?
All right, okay. My website is my name, so AMaliahGrace.com. It's very simple, and I am on Facebook as my name, Amaliah Grace. I'm on Instagram, so you can get to see a lot of my artwork. That's Amalia_Ashanti_Grace. There was another Amaliah Grace on there. I don't know. It's starting to be used, my name. It's actually Hebrew. It's a spiritual name that I was asked to move into, and Grace, of course, because that's the energy of the divine feminine that I channel. And you can find that me on YouTube. So many of my YouTube videos are up there. And I am on Facebook, but I've also got specific pages. I've got Amaliah Grace author, and some of the workshops, some of the courses that I do have also got their own page, like the Ascension Star Codes of Light and the Soul Line Clearing page. If you go to Amaliah Grace / books, which is one of the tabs on my website, you will be able to scroll down and see, you'll be able to join a mailing list which is relating to buying or the books. But there's also three sections there I've put onto YouTube video where I'm reading the different chapters in the shamanic journey in Peru, so you can hear that. There's also several other interviews that you can source, so you can listen to, and some of the promotional videos that I put together. So there's quite a lot. And then if you go to the /music, that's where the interviews are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough. This has been an amazing time. We get to not only meet, but great amount of helpful information. I thank you for spending your early morning with me in Australia, because it's the afternoon here in New Mexico, so actually late afternoon. So I appreciate you taking your early morning and spending it and sharing your fantastic information with new writers. So check out Amaliah's site, and certainly I want to thank everybody for listening in here at leapintoyourstory.com, where you discover your inner story. We help you break it down and process it for you and help you on your journey to leap into your own story. So Amaliah, thank you so much. And thank you for tuning into the Leap Into Your Story podcast, where you discover your inner story, break down the process, and meet others who've done it so you can leap into your own story. Remember to visit our website at leapintoyourstory.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're there, subscribe and like to us via your favorite social media network. We're looking forward to seeing you next time on the Leap Into Your Story podcast.